So, welcome everyone. This is Sapna's first global gathering. Everyone that's here is obviously very passionate about climate justice, and it's a bit of a celebration as well because Sapna turns 5. It's been 5 years of incredible work and bringing people together from South Asian communities. My name is Munira, and I'm part of the 100 plus folks that are part of this network. And before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that I am on unceded lands of Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, and sovereignty was never ceded. And any climate justice work requires First Nations justice as well. So we will acknowledge that and remember it in every work that we do around climate. So this is going to be the a meeting that will last an hour and a half. So if folks can stay on, that would be amazing. It's very low-key, relaxed vibes. I've got my tea here. If you want to grab a drink, go ahead. And yeah, just relax and listen in, and we'll have some discussions in between. So this will be fun as well. I'll pass to Nidhi and Ruchira now.
Hi, everyone. It's so lovely to see so many faces from so many different places. My name is Nidhi. I'm the designer and producer at Sapna. So I've been with Sapna for about 2 years now, and I've worked on everything from social media, videos to reports and website creatives. I am dialing in today from Bangalore. It's a quite hot day today. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so peak heat. So I've got some coconut water with me straight from the source. I don't know if you can see it. I'm a little nervous because it might roll over and spill on my laptop, so I'm gonna keep this aside. But I was thinking maybe we can start this evening with a video that we put together as Sapna turns 5. So I'm gonna share screen.
Hi, everyone. It's absolutely delightful to see this stream of people coming in through Zoom. I can't think of the time in my life that I've had 100 people over to anything that I've had. This is absolutely overwhelming, and we feel so grateful for it. So, welcome everyone, wherever you're joining from Australia, from South Asia, and other parts of the world. This is Sapna's first global gathering as we turn 5, and it's just absolutely, absolutely delightful to see that there's such interest in and a curiosity to know about the work we do. So before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that when I'm in Melbourne, I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, it's always Aboriginal land. Right now, I'm in a village 3 hours from Calcutta, Kolkata in India, and here too, in the context of indigenous peoples of South Asia, sovereignty was never ceded. Sovereignty was never ceded by any First Nations, indigenous people anywhere in the world. So I think the first exciting thing that I want to throw at you, before I open up a PowerPoint, is that we've had a roller coaster 5 years journey as a very small climate justice project in Australia's South Asian diaspora. And Nidhi's just played us a video, which I think a few people have missed, and you might see it again. So what does our name mean? Sapna, South Asian Climate Solidarity, and how did we come up with it? I see some friends who were co-founders with me who are here today, and it's great to see your faces again. So in 2020, we started as a group of South Asians, young and not so young, in the climate movement in Australia. We wanted a space for ourselves, and we started gathering online. And we started hearing and talking about stories of climate and environmental movements from South Asia. That became a very strong glue for our gatherings. And over time, we finally found it formally as a project. And we are hosted in Friends of the Earth Australia. And I'm absolutely, absolutely thankful to Friends of the Earth, which is possibly the strongest, soundest climate justice based platform for us to have, for where we could be nested, always in solidarity. And we got a lot of support from the Move Beyond Coal movement to start off. And we started as the primary thing we did in the beginning was to be able to bring stories of South Asians and impacts, climate impacts. But we've moved a long way from there. And I think before I get into my PowerPoint, I just want to share with you very quickly actually, I'll let Nidhi do this. Is it all right for Nidhi just to pull up the website and show the drop-down menu of the Our Work pages? Because we'll be talking about those a lot in the next 10 minutes.
Sure.
So we've just come up with a new website, which really does justice to the breadth and the possibility of the work we do at Sapna, which is not just about Australia and not just in Australia, but it is transnational in scope. Because a climate justice project, which is located in Nidhi, you can pull up the website while I talk, it's completely fine. A climate justice project, which is about migrants whose lives are transnational, whose realities are transnational, cannot be kind of about one place. This is a paradigm shift, I would say, for, kind of in a way talking about engaging diverse communities in Australia. Well, it's been done for Pacific Island and other communities, but to think about forging links between two places with the work, it's a bit different. So this is our new website, and I'll be referring to the South Asian climate stories, Australia's climate responsibilities, and the other areas of our work quite a bit. I will leave you to look at the website at your own time, and maybe there'll be things that I talk about which you're going to find really interesting, and you're going to come back and check on it. But I won't jump between the PowerPoint and this one. Thanks, Nidhi. So about the 5 years and the ground we have built with the work we are doing and the possibilities that come from it. So first of all, why South Asian climate solidarity? Why a project like Sapna? I think if we, as I said, we started as a part of the Move Beyond Coal movement and bringing stories of climate impacts in South Asia, where our families come from, was a dominant stream of that work, but it is much, much more now, and it has to be. So if we try to understand the relevance of Sapna today, there are a few things we need to think about. South Asia is recognized not only is it recognized as one of the most climate vulnerable regions in the world, it is also, if we think of the sheer scale of the number of people who are exposed to its direct impacts, it's considered the most vulnerable. So in the last 10 years, in the last 20 years, migration from South Asia to Australia has kind of increased significantly. And we are now, South Asians, we are now a Latin community coming from a very climate vulnerable place. South Asia needs climate solidarity, and we are Australia's largest migrant community. That's one perspective setting thought about why do we need a project like Sapna South Asian Climate Solidarity. The other part is also about what is the role of South Asian migrants. I mean, we know about the term model minority, and so many of us, in fact, have grown up here. I haven't. Kind of have grown up under the rubric of that frame of being model minority. But it's been questioned about what's the potential of this diaspora and what kind of work would it do now as, kind of as the largest migrant community. And these bring up critical questions for a platform like Sapna, where we have 100+ community of South Asians who care about climate justice. What kind of work collectively can we do as South Asians living in Australia and whose lives are constantly across Australia and South Asia? So getting to that, I think I'd like to state a few things first. And Nidhi has drawn us we're going to go through slides where we have Mughal art on it, just metaphors for what we're talking about. Please don't take them literally. But they're reading a book, and I'm just going to give a very quick and perhaps a slightly shameless plug to something that I've spent years of my life on, but it speaks to the research of many other people as well. So before we started Sapna, I was finishing my PhD, and I was looking at the similarities and differences in climate activism in Australia and South Asia, particularly the movements that come from the ground. But I was also looking to forge, how do we understand a global movement? Where are the similarities between the global North and South? But one thing that came across to me very strongly, and we have this diagram on the Sapna website on the South Asian Stories page, this is where our stories fall from, is that we can, in Australia, have a singular frame of stop coal and start renewables. But when we look at the ground in South Asia, when we look at the ground in India, even grassroots struggles against coal mines are much, much more than just stopping the coal mine, because the next big threat might be a so-called climate solution that kind of is foisted on the people, their forests and their land there. So the challenge is to try and have singular frames for all the struggles that come from the ground from South Asia. So one of the things we do, as you've seen in the video, is that we bring stories from the ground from South Asia. Why do we need to do that? Why fund work like that in Australia? Why is it critical? So the thing is, I'm gonna walk through why it is critical from the perspective of us South Asians. And there are many of you who are joining the Sapna community now. Welcome, everyone. But this is one way of understanding how we join the dots between what's going on in South Asia and what we translate to our friends, our colleagues, our allies, our community and society here in Australia. So there are a few South Asian campaigners and friends who are here as well. And they know perhaps far better than me, because they're constantly much more on the ground, that the challenge is to, it's a challenge to try and frame issues from the ground. There are so many stories, so many calls to action that are necessary. But if we must frame stories coming from the ground, then a more true and a more encompassing frame is real climate solutions versus false climate solutions. And you would have seen, some of you might have seen our infographics and our stories related to that. So essentially, this is what we do through the stories we bring from the ground. And we've, this is something that I myself have been passionate about. And when we started off doing this work seriously, we had, the collaboration of a senior journalist who's also a photographer. And we've been able to actually invest in something, do something which usually climate organizations don't think of doing. Being able to get those all those entangled stories of people of communities who are doing things on the ground. Take, for example, our young friends from the Sundarbans who have joined us today, and they'll share their experience with you a bit later. Sundarbans is known, what we call in our jargon, as a climate hotspot. But the place is more spoken about than, we hear lesser stories from community there themselves. So how do we talk about a place where people themselves who are doing the work on the ground can share their stories? Also, how can we talk about a place and the challenges they're facing? For example, in the Sundarbans, which straddles India and its largest mangrove forests, if you're not considering community-supported, assisted mangrove regeneration work, you could still be taking access of communities to their traditional lands, to their fishing grounds away. So solutions, climate solutions from the ground up, real climate solutions, that's the framing we use. Now to perhaps the most, and I think a lot of you are really interested in these aspects of our work, about how South Asian migrants in Australia can be engaged and mobilized on climate change. And we know that environmental organizations in Australia have tried many different things, but perhaps the single biggest, to me, both as a South Asian myself and someone who's been in the Australian climate movement for quite some time, the fundamental gap is that migrant stories, the accounts of migrants as people who live their lives, have care and responsibilities across places, it's not acknowledged. And once you cannot do that, once you cannot allow migrants to fully unravel their stories, you really can't get to the bottom of what motivates them and what the imperatives are to act on an issue. Also, what their whole idea of justice is, or the politics of justice is. So some of you have come to the launch of our Sapna report in 2022, and quite a few of you have actually, whose stories are also in this. So kind of an account of the experience that young South Asian climate activists had in the Australian climate movement. And one of the things that is in the report is a quote, and I've picked it up over here, and it's really telling. Like for Sapna, the work, like in 2022, after launching the report, after collecting those stories, after writing this report, our work really is to begin from there. That the climate movement reaches a lot of people, but it just doesn't reach our own people. So, our community, our families, particularly first generation South Asians living in Australia. So what we do today is we've just had last year, we've just had gatherings of South Asians in Sydney and Melbourne. And we were gathering because the floods and other so-called natural disasters in South Asia were cataclysmic last year. And they've been growing worse every year. And a lot of people, a lot of us contribute to our communities, to rebuilding our communities. So we gathered to actually kind of with that objective in mind to be able to talk about those things. But of course, the conversations became about much more. So some of the fundamental things, if we are to try and put a framework to what our conversations are about, and the pattern of the trajectory of conversations that can happen when South Asians get together, and what underpins the kind of climate conversations we would have as migrants is, like where we come from is so fundamental in it because the reasons are obvious. And what we also carry, our values, our knowledges, and whether we use them directly in Australia or not, they're always there and always motivating and stimulating us. And definitely the politics of justice we have is drawn very strongly from places we come from, our families, our communities. And again, the question for us, for Sapna, as we have more and more conversations in the South Asian community is about how does that, what does climate action mean then for us? We're carrying these things. So a gathering, so essentially, if you do look at our website and you look at South Asians in Australia, our climate actions page, you will see that, there is a video report over there with details. But essentially, can I just encapsulate this and I think as a South Asian, particularly one who's kind of had a brush with climate activism in Australia or the mainstream climate narrative, I think you will know what we're talking about when we say that it allows us to tell our stories as migrants, the lives we live, the places we come from, the languages, the meaning of things, the sense we make. So, and now consider some other things. And now we're going a bit deeper into the significance of being a South Asian migrant in Australia who actually cares about climate justice. We are doing a lot of things. We are always acting as a conduit. The word on the left in Hindi is "Mausam badal raha hai," the weather is changing, which is how commonly a lot of people on the ground in the Hindi-speaking parts of in the northern South Asian spaces, northern Indian spaces, will describe climate change. They will not use a scientific language. They will not use a scientific term. So essentially, with the possibility of a Sapna community, who kind of we are interfaces for what we bring from South Asia, the stories we know, and also the scientific language that's spoken here, because the majority of people who live in South Asia and are on the, if we want to use the jargon that we use, the front lines of climate change, do not speak the scientific language. So if you think about the possibility of being a movement, being a collective in the South Asian diaspora in Australia who care about climate justice, we're constantly needing to do this work. Connect local stories from the ground, like the kind of stories we bring, connect them with the global narrative. And that's already happening. Like friends in the Sapna community are already doing it. I'm kind of like, it's already happening. They're using it in their workspaces. They're talking about stories that come from the place that their families come from and taking it, kind of to a broader space. The other equally crucial part of the story is that we know with escalating climate change in South Asia, rising extreme heat and things like that, traditional solutions are not working anymore. We know that. But at the same time, if you think about the scale of the problem, and the vast majority of South Asians will adapt to summer heat by doing traditional things like eating cooling foods and putting a headscarf over their head and so on and so forth. They will not be able to afford air conditioning or even a cooler or refrigerator, maybe. So it's a very nuanced and a critical conversation about traditional solutions and adaptation. Kind of things that people are still practicing in South Asia, and wherever it's relevant to be able to talk about them. So we need to be able to talk about local solutions from the ground from a place like South Asia in the context of kind of global action and global solutions. Because if we think about it, we know as South Asians that massive scale stuff has historically been an issue with the environmental justice movements in India, in South Asia. So many of them have historically been about resisting, kind of big scale projects. So these are some of the things that are, kind of critical for us to do as diaspora. So linking back to the stories we tell, one of the climate change in their own words was a story we did where, kind of we just described, and we wrote it in English, of course. We described how people were talking about the weather and their observations. More of this needs to come into the climate conversation. The Bangladesh report that we worked on 2 years ago was a collection of case studies of how communities with very, very less spending are building climate resilience on the ground at the very local level. Women-led, women-centered initiatives for early warning systems. Something that the world acknowledges that Bangladesh is kind of like the best in. And Australia apparently kind of, takes those best practice kind of case studies and kind of brokers and talks about them in the Pacific nation regions and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of work for us to do. And as South Asians living in Australia, kind of talking about climate change and engaged to be able to connect the ground realities with the present context in Australia today, where climate change impacts are also increasing. And and just take cognizance of all these gaps and divides. Like more than nearly 90% of the world, kind of does not communicate in English, but most climate policies written in English. So things that we need to kind of think about and keep in mind in terms of the work that's possible for Sapna and the community to do. So this has been happening, but it's not happened on the scale that we'd love for it to happen, simply because, we just need to be able to have the capacity to do work. But as South Asians, who believe in solidarity, South Asians who care about climate justice, our work is also to be able to connect stories of First Nations communities, struggles and histories across places. The more we learn here in Australia, the more we feel compelled to connect stories from the ground from South Asia. And this is where our work with First Nations climate projects, climate justice projects, Pacifica climate justice projects operating in Australia is crucial. And there's much more of that to be done. So there is something else that's come up, and I'm going to take a little break in the next 5 minutes and let Sapna community members and collaborators talk. But I just want to leave you with a couple of things before that. There's something that's come up in the last 10 years, and it's really interesting to think about how this, brings something that migrants always do. Migrants from global south locations to global north locations, from non-wealthy countries to wealthy countries. Simply put, also from South Asia to Australia. Things that migrants do, which has become pretty critical for climate action. So much has been written about. Research has been done and written about the fact that everyday acts of sustainability, that's something that migrants practice for many different reasons. They don't find relevance in climate policy and climate actions of environmental organizations. So there's a dissonance both between what environmental organizations want the supporters to do and South Asian migrants in this case. But this act of remitting money to their communities back home, something migrants have always been doing, and particularly green remittances, which is money sent back after so-called natural disasters. It's emerged as the only definite way in which the most amount of money is flowing from wealthy countries to vulnerable countries. So I'm going to come to the nitty-gritties of this in a bit in terms of the requirements under the United Nations framework on the Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement in 2015 and what was set down. But essentially, what has happened is that the everyday acts of migrants is now a critical climate justice action. And what do we make of it? What do we think of it? And what does it mean about the work we do and our climate activism? Something for us South Asians to think about. Last year, when we had the Sapna Solidarity gatherings for the spate of natural disasters happening in South Asia, it was a very easy conversation to be had, not just with people who were in the room, but every other person I'm meeting on the street who's South Asian, the person who drove me in the Uber to the meeting, that it's just a step, like we send money back home to help our communities recover after natural disasters, to build sustainable agriculture, to build a sustainable home, to start a renewable energy project, and that the Australian government has climate finance responsibilities towards vulnerable countries, particularly the mechanism of loss and damage, which is about being able to provide money for irrevocable climate events where there's a lot of loss. So it's just a one step removed kind of deduction that someone will make, whether they want to be an activist or not. So what does this make us? Could we be advocates for Australia's climate responsibility towards South Asia? And herein, I think I just want to signal to my friends from the climate movement in Australia who are here that there's a strong reason and there are enough grounds for the narrative of the climate movement about Australia's climate responsibility nationally and towards Pacific Island neighbors. But a place like South Asia and given that South Asians are the largest migrant community, requires for that narrative framing to be opened up to include Australia's climate responsibility towards South Asia. This is all on our webpage, and so I'm not going to kind of, take too much time on the slide, but basically to consider opening up, the space in the narrative for this, because it doesn't really take away from, the asks and the demands. It actually broadens it and strengthens it, brings more strategic kind of leverage to, kind of calling for accountability. So these are some of the things, for interest of this, but this would be of interest to, South Asians gathered here. This is of interest to a lot of local government and federal government people who are actually here listening to this presentation about how about, a critical civil society, a critical mass of civil society movement that support Australia's global climate finance actions, at a time of increasing kind of right-wing hostility and a lot of cutbacks and things like that. And fundamentally, for everyone to recognize that a project like this needs to work transnationally, and kind of for South Asians friends from South Asia who are joining us, what can we work on together in terms of stories of vulnerable communities and rights and justice-based claims? So essentially, in just the last 1 minute before I take a break, what we have had to create, we started with a seat at the table, our space to tell stories of climate impacts of our communities from South Asia. When we started in Move Beyond Coal was that. But we needed to create a table of our own because the grounds we stand on are different. And I've spent the last more than 10 minutes kind of talking about that. In my PhD, in my thesis and the book that's come afterwards, I've painstakingly talked about the challenges and the differences, even the structural, political, and social differences faced by Indigenous communities in the recognition of their rights between Australia and India. And the thing is, the more time elapses, the more these differences seem to grow for a range of different reasons. So for us South Asians who are stitching together stories from South Asia and here, we need to understand the differences and we need to think about how a common ground and how shared ground gets built. Also, as migrants from South Asia, our response to climate change and our response to climate action would be its own, not unique, but would be its own thing, needing to be recognized in its own right. So we do stand a distinct ground, and that ground needs to be built. So we build a table. And of course, we work to kind of create a shared ground of understanding with our work. So have had quite a few workshops in Australia to kind of stitch together things and hope to do more of that. But that's just a tiny beginning. So basically, kind of, it all comes down to the last 5 years have been fabulous in terms of the work we've been able to do. But if we were able to even build a team, we are, kind of 2 people working part-time. Now, it was different even before this. If we're not able to build a team, we can't do the work we need to do. So essentially, there are some things that need to be recognized and some things that need to shift for us to be able to not just survive, but thrive and do the work we need to do. That transnational climate justice work is required. That building a South Asian climate justice movement in Australia is required, and including South Asia and the movement narrative of Australia's climate actions is also necessary. So I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to ask anyone who's collaborated with Sapna, stories on research, or any Sapna community member, wants to share about what's the value about the work, about the space, about the stories we bring. So just unmute and speak. But I think what we'll do is after this, I have just 5 more minutes talking specifically about our Green Remittance project, and I know some of you really want to hear about it. So after this, we're going to take that, and any questions and a further discussion will happen after that. Before I open it up to a few people who I know want to share, I'm just going to ask our young friends, Trideep and Prashanjit from Sundarban, from the Indian part of the Sundarbans, who are here. If they want to share a few words about what does it mean when their stories and the work they're doing there comes out in the global space. So, Trideep, Prashanjit, তোমরা যদি বলতে চাও, মাইকটা অন করে নাও, বলো, আর আমি ট্রান্সলেট করব।
হাই, আমি ত্রিদীপ দাস। আমি লাস্ট 3 বছর ধরে প্রামেয়া ফাউন্ডেশনের সঙ্গে যুক্ত, এবং আমি লাস্ট 3 বছরে একটা 10 হেক্টর ম্যানগ্রোভের প্রজেক্টে আমরা কাজ করেছিলাম, ম্যানগ্রোভ রেস্টোরেশন, কনজারভেশন এবং প্ল্যান্টেশন। ওটা প্রায় 2 লক্ষ ম্যানগ্রোভ ছিল। বর্তমানে আমরা ওটাকে বাড়িয়ে প্রায় 30 হেক্টর প্লাস এবং প্রায় 6 লক্ষ ম্যানগ্রোভের একটা প্রজেক্টে কাজ করছি। আমরা এই কাজ করতে গিয়ে কিছু কিছু জিনিস, খুব চ্যালেঞ্জিং জিনিস আমরা যেগুলো লক্ষ্য করি, সেগুলো ধরুন প্রথমত যেটা আসে সেটা হচ্ছে সময়ের একটা অমিলের একটা ব্যাপার আসে। ধরুন অনেক ফান্ডিং এজেন্সি ওরা চায় যে খুব দ্রুত সঙ্গে দৃশ্যমান ফলাফল আশা করে। ধরুন কিছু ম্যানগ্রোভ তো আর হঠাৎ হঠাৎ করে বেড়ে যায় না, আমরা তো স্পেশালি ম্যানগ্রোভ নিয়ে কাজ করি। ধরো একটা ম্যানগ্রোভকে ভালোভাবে জঙ্গল হিসেবে দাঁড় করাতে 4 থেকে 5 বছর সময়। কিন্তু সেটা খুব তাড়াতাড়ি দৃশ্যমান ফলাফলের আশা করলে খুব প্রবলেম হয়। দ্বিতীয়ত আরেকটা জিনিস হয় যে শুধু আমরা ম্যানগ্রোভ প্লান্টেশন করলেই তো আর দায়িত্ব শেষ হয়ে যায় না। নিয়মিত সেটাকে রক্ষণাবেক্ষণ এবং নিয়মিত দেখাশোনার, বা এই যে গবাদি পশু, লোকাল লাইফ স্টক থাকে ওদের জন্য, এবং প্রাকৃতিক কারণেও কিন্তু অনেক চারার মৃত্যু হয়। এবং তৃতীয়ত যেটা আমরা দেখি যে আমরা প্রশাসনিক লেভেল থেকে কোনো কাজ শুরু করার আগে আমরা প্রশাসনিক লেভেল থেকে একটা এনওসি আমাদের নিতে হয়, নো অবজেকশন সার্টিফিকেট টাইপের নিতে হয়। কিন্তু এইটা নেওয়ার ক্ষেত্রে যখন প্রশাসনিক ব্যাপার বলে একটু সময় সাপেক্ষ ব্যাপার হয়, তার জন্য কিন্তু প্রজেক্টের যে স্পিড বা যেভাবে আমরা কাজ করতে চাই তার কিন্তু গতিটা অনেকটা কমে যায়। এইসব জিনিসগুলো আমি পার্সোনালি কয়েকটা লক্ষ্য করেছি। এবং আমার সঙ্গে প্রসেনজিৎ আছে, প্রসেনজিৎ আর দুটো হয়তো থাকবেও, বলে দিচ্ছে। থ্যাংক ইউ।
নমস্কার, আমি প্রসেনজিৎ আচার্য। আমিও এই ত্রিদীপের মতো একইভাবেই প্রামিয়া ফাউন্ডেশনের সাথে প্রায় 3 বছর সাথে যুক্ত। প্রায় সমস্যার কথাগুলো বললো, তাই আমি বেশি কিছু বলবো না। ম্যানগ্রোভ রিস্টোরেশন মানে শুধু কিছু গাছ লাগানো নয়, এর সাফল্যের মূল চাবিকাঠি আমাদের লুকিয়ে আছে দীর্ঘমেয়াদী পরিচর্যার ক্ষেত্রে। কারণ গাছ লাগিয়ে দিয়ে চলে গেলে কিংবা তার পরিচর্যা না করলে কিন্তু ঠিকঠাক ভাবে গাছ দাঁড়ায় না। কারণ একটা ম্যানগ্রোভ গাছ তার স্বাভাবিক অবস্থায় যেতে প্রায় 4 থেকে 5 বছর লাগে। তাই এর জন্য দরকার দ্রুত প্রশাসনিক সহযোগিতা, প্রতিকূল প্রকৃতির সাথে লড়াই, যার কারণ হচ্ছে বিজ্ঞানসম্মত প্রস্তুতি এবং সর্বোপরি স্থানীয় জনগণের স্বতঃস্ফূর্ততা অংশগ্রহণের মাধ্যমে আমাদের এই প্রকল্প এবং প্রজেক্টগুলো কিন্তু সফল করতে পারি আমরা।
থ্যাংক ইউ।
এবং ঠিক এই জিনিসটাই আমরা এই লোকাল লোক বা এমনি সবাইকে সচেতন করার জন্যে, রুচিরাদি তুমি জানো, তুমি আমাদের এই বিষয়ে একটা হেল্প করেছো। তুমি আমাকে বলেছিলে যে তুমি যদি সোশ্যাল মিডিয়াতে দিয়ে, ফাউন্ডেশনের সহযোগিতায় আমরা একটা পেজ বানিয়েছি সোশ্যাল মিডিয়াতে, দ্য ম্যানগ্রোভ মিরর বলে। এবং আমরা
আমি এটা বলে দিচ্ছি, হ্যাঁ, আমি এটা বলে দিচ্ছি এবার।
হ্যাঁ,
সো তোমরা করে নাও, তোমরা মিউট করে নাও, আমি হ্যাঁ। So basically, we were speaking in Bengali, which is also my native language, and we've had a chance to bring a few stories from the Sundarbans, where they're working with the Foundation for Premier, and they've been planting mangoes. This is the thing. We talk in the international language of climate action, but what does it mean on the ground? So, there's funding pressure, there's pressure to grow mangoes really quickly, but that's not feasible. And that might actually be counterintuitive and detrimental for the communities who access their lands there as well. So they have all kinds of pressures on them. And there's a mainstream paradigm of climate solutions and adaptation restoration work, which actually makes it difficult. Sorry, the power's gone off, but you can still see my face. Actually makes it very difficult to do the work properly. So we hope we'll be bringing stories from there, and they themselves are doing fantastic stories from the ground, and we'll feature them on the Sapna website and Instagram. Please do have a look. It's important to hear voices from the ground itself. They themselves telling the story about what's going on. And we hope to do a climate justice workshop there in the future, where we can bring people who speak the global language to understand the real challenges and the stories from the ground. Okay, then I might just kind of take another 5 minutes and kind of just give you a few specifics about the research and engagement project that's coming up. And if after that anyone feels like there's a thunderstorm coming, so you can hear kind of doors thrashing behind me. It just makes it very climactic, but this is the reality. And if anyone wants to share even after that, that's fine. Okay, back to share screen. So I know that some of you are quite curious and interested about a project that we have started, and it's been fantastic to get kind of interest from quite a few researchers who want to work with us on this. So yeah, essentially the question about South Asians are Australia's largest migrant group, and what does this mean for climate justice? That's the question we are holding. And think about a few things that have converged over the last 10 years in the global climate policy space, but also in South Asian migration space into Australia. So I'm not going to read out what's on the slide, but essentially from the Paris Climate Agreement times, certain frameworks have been forged. But what's happened is that, kind of wealthy countries have been very unforthcoming with kind of climate finance, and the gap between goals set and what's actually been put on the table is massive. Now, remittances, money that people send back home to their families and communities is known. It's kind of it's been researched and seen and calculated and measured. It's known to be the largest kind of money flow mechanism in the world from wealthy countries to vulnerable countries. So then, green remittances as well. It's been the largest climate finance stream going from wealthy countries to developing countries, to vulnerable countries, for communities to repair, build climate resilience, adapt. So essentially, what this means is that, like South Asians, Australia's largest migrant group, climate events increasing and intensifying in South Asia. And quite likely, it's actually very hard to get hard statistics on remittances and green remittances, because a lot of them might go kind of privately to families. A lot of them go through big environmental organizations. So it's hard to kind of definitely quantify. But whatever estimates, estimates will tell you that it's quite likely that green remittances by South Asians have increased in this time. And it's a very kind of significant factor in climate finance flowing from Australia to South Asia. So our takeaway is, Sapna, from this is, there's a big story to tell there about the scale of green remittances by Australia's largest migrant community and how it supports resilience and recovery in South Asia at the ground level. With the kind of work that Trideep and Prashanjit are doing in the Sundarbans, for example, the kind of work that we have talked about in the Bangladesh report, resilience building at the ground level. So it's just not about scale. And for us, which is why stories at the ground we tread on, each story that connects a South Asian migrant and their hard-earned income in a new country. And, mind you, like we know this, that remitting money home is something that, even like a gig worker and a fruit picker on a very kind of unsure visa to Australia would do. That's the first thing a migrant does. And, supporting communities back home to stand back on their feet. Each story really matters. So we also think that these stories can build a critical ground for calling on Australia's climate responsibility towards South Asia. So we intend to have a lot of kitchen table conversations with South Asians in the cities, in kind of peri-urban areas, in many different places. We also have a survey on our website on the homepage. So please, if you're a South Asian living in Australia, please fill out that survey. That's a start. and a continuous series of stories. And of course, we will do a report on tour as well. But the other side of the story, like the stories we had from Bangladesh of community resilience building on the ground, how it's done. There'll be many stories, more stories like that that we bring. A lot of us are working on this project, researchers, myself. We have that kind of, we move between Australia and South Asia. Our work, our research, families take us to both places. So there'll be stories from the ground from South Asia. And this is also a call out to friends who are joining from South Asia. When you know that there's work being done to build community resilience at the ground level, can we talk about those stories? Can we find linkages of remittance from Australia and these projects? So basically, it comes down to the same thing. We should really be able to do this to scale and turn our research and engagement into mobilization advocacy. But it needs wide-scale collaborations. It also needs structured funding. I'm just going to leave you with this. This is about the US, but it is also something that we think about quite a bit in Australia. Not particularly crack down on migration, but the racist backlash that's there. And what does standing our ground as South Asian migrants and our transnational climate activism mean? Kind of against this rhetoric of racism that is very strong right now. So, in a nutshell, in just one sentence, if we were to say, this is us, this is Sapna, our South Asian Climate Solidarity, we must do this work. We must connect our many worlds, and we must build a shared ground of justice. So, yeah, that's the end of the presentation. Thank you, and I'll just pass over to Munira now to just open for questions, comments, reflections from everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruchira. Yeah, so we were thinking that we just have kind of an open discussion. Any comments or reflections that came up when you were watching the presentation, or anything really that you would like to share?
If no one wants to go first, I could jump in with some reflections as one of the early/older Sapna members, if useful. So yeah, I just wanted to take a minute
Can I
to.
just say why? Like everyone, just introduce yourselves, because there are people from so many
Yes,
different
of
places.
course. Sorry, yes. So my name is Vaidehi. I'm also, you can call me Vai, and I am calling in from Gadigal land in Sydney. I am a part of the Australian climate movement, and I joined Sapna in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. I just got this message from Sapna co-founder Jess Howard telling me about this amazing group that had, she and Ruchira had started, and it's incredible that it's turned 5 this year and having had such incredible kind of impact and just expansive storytelling over these years. And I've been thinking about how, the word Sapna means dream, as you heard. And back in 2020, in the middle of like deep isolation amidst the pandemic, it genuinely felt like a dream to have an organization like this. It started off as kind of just South Asians working in the climate movement, and it was just a place to kind of rest and reflect and share solidarity, as being part of a movement that is, sometimes diversities had to come by in the movement. So this was just such a beautiful space, and to see how it's grown from that to kind of real life connections with South Asians in the diaspora and transnational linkages to such incredible necessary storytelling, and now kind of campaigns that link into global campaigns for climate justice, climate finance, etc., is really important. And this just feels like, the 5-year mark and the global moment we are in terms of, worsening climate impacts, and the conversation around South Asians in Australia becoming more politicized and polarized than ever. And I'm sure many people on the call are feeling this acutely. Amidst all that, there's a lot of kind of hope and potential for Sapna's future to expand our imagination and power for, for building a climate justice movement that I think would resonate deeply with a lot of us. So just wanted to share those reflections.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Vaidehi. We've also got a few lovely comments coming on the chat. Cam says, wonderful and very inspiring. Great PowerPoint and beautifully done. Artful too. Yes, I love the Mughal miniature art. Yeah, let's go to Jagjit.
Wow, I'm blown away. I was just thinking, I cannot believe it's 5 years because I remember, Ruchira, when you were telling me about this at the Asian conference, and I can't believe it's been 5 years. So many congratulations to you and your amazing team. Obviously, just the work you've done and these connections between Australia and India. I just found that last image that you have very, very powerful. Thank you so much for bringing people from the Sundarbans. As you know, the imagination about the Sundarbans is really increasing because of Amitav Ghosh's work in this area. And he's just launched his new book. But from The Great Derangement to other books, we always imagine this area which has the largest mangrove forest in the world and how important mangroves are for resilience. I really, the project that you're looking at, which is first of all, stories from the ground, but the second one, which is about green remittances. I hadn't thought about a remittance going to India and how that's helping people cope. And the Australian dollar has been shooting up, so this can only be a good thing for people back home who are relying on this, especially during extreme heat. So please reach out. I'm very, very happy to see how far you're going. It's absolutely fantastic. And there's another link that you have, which I've rarely seen elsewhere, which is that indigeneity, both in Australia and in India, and how we have similar narratives and differing narratives as well. So just brilliant. So thank you so much. And let's cook up a project with Sapna. Or contribute to one.
That sounds amazing. Thank you, Jagjit. And
Munira,
yes,
I'm just going to jump in. I know there are two hands.
yep.
But Peter says he's leaving in 2 minutes, and if Peter's left a comment, if Peter actually wants to unmute and speak before he leaves, I'll just let him do that before the other two hands. Sorry.
Yep.
Hi,
Peter.
thanks for that. So I just put a note in the chat saying I work with faith groups. I'm a Christian, but I work ecumenically through Queensland Churches Environmental Network and also ARC, the Australian Religious Response to Climate Change. And we too are working in solidarity with you and Indigenous people and calling on a call for a fossil fuel treaty, responding to the Pacific Islanders, calling out in every way. But I do wish you all the blessings and thank you for all your sharing. And I have many people living around me here in Brisbane who are from Southern Asia, and we always greet and say hi and all that. It's great to work together. So thank you and goodbye. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. We've got Deepak with hand up and Chris as well. So let's go to Deepak first. I think there were some connectivity issues earlier.
Yes. Well, this is Nandini logging in from Deepak's account. But I'm with Hindus for Human Rights. I'm joining from Mianjin, unceded lands of the Igara and Turpal people. I wanted to just congratulate you firstly. This is wonderful to hear so many stories and very inspiring to see allies doing great work. One of the things that I did want to talk about is the stories from the ground, because in climate distress, I would imagine one of the first casualties can be human rights. and how do we sort of interlink the human rights and the right to dignity and essentially right to so many other parameters that are linked to climate justice. Very happy to collaborate and work in that space. Once again, I think this is wonderful. And one of the main things that we try to do is to build this cross organizational, cross issue solidarity. So, very happy to think about ways in which we can do more, not just in Australia, but also if there were pathways to support direct action in India. Thank you.
I'm just going to jump in 1 second and respond to Nandini Deepak. Hi. So this is exactly where I talked about the challenge of those frames. I don't know if you were there in the first part of the singular narrative of stop coal and start renewables, which is required for global climate action. And frame, if we must, the ground, like Tridip and Prashanjit are talking about an array of challenges. Then all of that, the human rights, and in my own work and writing on coal resistances, so much of them finally became about human rights. All of that ground and all of those critical tensions on the ground can be talked about through the lens of real climate solutions. If we are to have climate justice and all of them come in and, kind of just wanted to throw that in because,
yeah. We'll continue the conversation, Ruchira.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you so much, Nandini. And folks, no question is a silly question, so ask anything, unmute, don't be shy. This is a very friendly environment where we can be open and can have discussions that we would like to. So please go ahead and unmute or raise your hand to have a chat, even if it's like a thought bubble. Please go ahead. We'll go to Chris, and there's some really interesting comments coming in. I'll get to that after we hear from Chris.
Thank you, Manira and Ruchira. I just wanted to say thank you for all the great work that you do, and it's great that there's a platform and a space for those connections to be made, those vital connections from South Asia to Australia, and the climate impacts that are being experienced over there. Yeah, I want to echo a lot of the sentiments that have been shared in the chat. And I also just wanted to put to you guys, what are good ways for people to get involved and support your work? Thank you.
I could just so for South Asians who are living in Australia, join the Sapna community. And also think of bringing your practice, creative practitioners, artists, photographers, writers. We need all those forms of engagement to build a vibrant movement. And if you are a climate organization, if you are an ally, then kind of ways in which understanding the grounds we stand on and how we can work together, that's vital. Our biggest challenge is that we've just not been able to grow a team across Australia and South Asia and do the work we need to do. And we are operating in a way that's very unsustainable for our personal selves, the amount of work there is. So that's perhaps the most critical ask of the hour. And this is also for South Asians here in Australia. We are influential, so many of us in so many spheres. How can we generate kind of, resources and funding for a project like this? Because climate philanthropy needs to recognize the grounds we stand on, and that work has not been done. And for people in South Asia who joined us today, there are so many ways in which we can collaborate on work on this transnational project. So, there you go. Yeah.
Thanks, Ruchira. And you can keep following on socials and to keep in touch. And Ruchira usually also sends out emails and updates through if you have signed up. So yeah, it's all very exciting. Lavanya.
Thanks, both. Just on that, what Richard is already talking about. Firstly, it was great to be here and see all the beautiful artwork that Nidhi has done on the slides and all the other things. And we have kind of been collaborating with Sapna a little bit over the last year on a few different things. And so I was kind of aware of some of these issues that you talk about, Richard, but there was a lot of new stuff here as well, which is great to hear about. And on that thing about building, connections between South Asia and Australia. We actually have a collaborative event with Sapna on the 24th of August, and it's a part of a series that we're doing to bring South Asian, Pacifica, and First Nation stories together. And we're trying to tap into First Nations, South Asian, and Pacifica audiences to come to these different films. So the South Asian one is going to be on the 24th of August. Ruchira will actually be back in Melbourne and will be hosting it with me. It's at Brunswick Picture House, so it is a Melbourne event. And the film that Ruchira has chosen to show for that is called Seed Stories, about Indigenous community in Odisha taking out this mammoth effort to save 1,000 climate resilient seeds. And we're going to show some soil stories. So the theme of that one is food and soil, that are from First Nations lands here. So we're going to put it out to the climate movement, and we're going to get all the same our usual suspects, but we would really love to we've made, like, the theme of the film is kind of around the ways we design is we want to bring new audiences. So it's like very entry level. And so people can connect to the stories that Richard was talking about from back home and then start talking and disperse it. And there will be calls to action both for Sapna and then anyone else who's involved in partnering with that. So I'll just pop the link in the chat if you want to share it with your communities. But yeah, hope to keep doing more of that and partnering and bringing different stories to the South Asian diaspora here with the also limited resources that 350 has here as well, but continuing our partnerships with different groups, including Sapna.
Thanks, Lavanya. This movie sounds amazing, and I will share the link with all my friends. Yeah, and like another thing we can do is whenever there are events like this, and this is not just for South Asian folks, also allies, you can share it amongst your networks. I mean, most of us would be in big climate action groups and things like that where we can keep promoting the work that Sapna does. So it's really exciting stuff. Thanks, Lavanya. There's some comments. James, thank you so much for the solidarity. James is saying thanks and congrats for all the work, and especially during these dark times of rising anti-immigration sentiment in Australia, solidarity and strength. Thank you, James. Maggie, would you like to unmute and say something, or you're happy to kind of leave the comment there and I can read it out loud?
Um, Can you hear me? I'm not
Yes.
sure.
Yep.
So thank you so much. It was really lovely to be part of this presentation. I'm joining from Kerala at the moment, but I usually work out of Melbourne. And I've been in conversation with Ruchira on and off for about, 2-3 months now, I think. Um, so she's talked a lot about Sapna, but I'm fairly new to this network and new to Australia myself as a very recent migrant. But this was a very informative presentation for me, and like everybody else, I also appreciate the design elements. So kudos to, I'm assuming that's Nidhi. So it's a great job. It's very, very visually appealing, and it's very well done. And I'm looking forward to a lot of things. I think I second a lot of people who were talking about an in-person event happening in either Melbourne, Sydney, wherever. So I'd love to be a part of anything like that if it's happening. And I'm sure that Ruchira and the team will keep us informed about that. But I'm also looking forward to work with Sapna and its researchers network. So there are quite a few, like, I don't know if there are more, but at least Thelma and myself, along with Ruchira, who are beginning to work in a very nascent manner on this green remittance project that she was talking about. And if there are other researchers also who could perhaps find interest and join it, it would be lovely to work as a team on this. It's absolutely fantastic, I think, what Sapna is doing. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who are working in their own small ways, whether it be through research, whether it be through education, whether it be through civil society work. But the space that Sapna is creating, especially through storytelling, both in Australia and in South Asia, is a very niche space. And I think a lot of us would be very, very happy to support in whatever way possible. So thanks for inviting me, and it was lovely. And I'm looking forward to my personal journey with Sapna and yeah, to keep connected. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Maggie. And yeah, there's a few others also asking for an in-person gathering, so you've got your next assignment ready for you, Ruchira. Although the film might be a nice place, the film showing might be a nice place for all of us folks in NARM to attend and connect. And Maggie, something you said is so relatable because I remember when I joined the climate movement about 8 years ago, I was like, where's all the other people that look like me? And so this has been such a beautiful thing. Like I get really emotional every time I talk about it in Sapna events and things like that, that, this is such a beautiful space to be in where people just get me. So, yeah. Anyone else would like to unmute and share or say, ask anything, questions, clarifications, comments?
I think I'm going to throw something in for people if they're feeling, energetic enough now, or to just kind of come back to us later on. Like, how would you like to engage with and work with Sapna? What are the ideas that you're leaving with from this? Including criticisms. Kind of like, what are some of the things that kind of captured your imagination, or what are some of the things that you think are not quite right? Come back to us, like respond to us, give us feedback, give us your thoughts. And like we talked about this for a while, and there is work to be done with everybody, like growing the Sapna community, being part of it, the journey we have to go on, as a climate organization Australia, as a South Asian climate organization, as kind of community groups doing work on the ground, which we talk about a lot, like Tridip and Prashanjit. I'm so glad they're here today. So there is an association in multiple dimensions, and just come back with some thoughts after this. The purpose of the global gathering was we could actually gather everyone who's been associated with this work, with this space, and for them to kind of, like re-engage with the fresh energy, for us to re-engage with the fresh energy. So we'd like to hear your thoughts. And I think, Lena, it'll be really good if you unmuted and kind of shared, this. It'll be kind of, it's just have I think others will feel kind of warmed up to do that as well, in terms of this is who I am and this is what we could do, and just a few of those shares.
Sure, thank you. I thought I would get away with it by just typing. I'm Lena Patel. I'm based on the unceded lands of the Boonwurrung people in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne. I work as an independent facilitator, and quite a few of the different organisations I work with are in the climate and environmental and sustainable space. I personally have a personal interest in and have offered support as a coach, working one-on-one, specifically with people of colour in the climate movement. And generally speaking, that's ended up being mostly women. So I have just a personal interest in that, and it's translated into the kind of work that organisations seek me out for. So I've worked with a bunch of the same organisations that you are all probably familiar with. And so I just want to make that offer to Sapna, as most of my work is more kind of like team-based, or where you're kind of facilitating or bringing folks together. I don't have the fortitude to do the kind of direct, or, to be more involved in the, campaigning side of things that I'm sure you're all really brilliant at with campaigning and organising, but more of that sort of background piece about how are you going as a team, and how are you going, especially when you've got multi-stakeholder, cross-cultural work that needs to be done, how that's kind of being done in a respectful way. So it's my offer, and I'll pop my website in, and you can it'll say just about what I just said.
I'm wondering, Munira, we might just wrap up now because people are starting to leave. And if I can just say a couple of things in the last 2 minutes at the risk of repeating myself. So, this is uncharted waters, having so many people, this level of interest, and Sapna's first global gathering, Sapna turning 5. There are so many possibilities from here on. And we just want to kind of reinvigorate all our engagements with all kinds of people, communities, groups who have come here today. Thank you for your time. I want to especially, it actually does feel very special that our young friends from the Sundarbans could join us. It's easier for some of us to get into a Zoom meeting and not so easy for others, but the work on the ground is the most critical thing of which we pivot. So I'm very happy that Tridip and Prasenjit could join us, and do watch our Instagram and stories space for the work they're doing and how they're telling stories of their place, which we in our climate jargon call Climate Hotspot. There will be in-person gatherings in Melbourne soon, starting with the film that Lavanya from 350 talked about. And we are very excited that we possibly do a first workshop in Sundarbans again about bringing the international language layer to local stories. So this is the kind of work that's to be done in both places. Excited about both, but also exhausted and absolutely thankful from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you so much, everyone who's come.